I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
Sometimes it takes a different approach to help you unlock your true potential. Capella University's game-changing FlexPath format helps you learn at your own pace and fit earning a degree into your life. From before you enroll to after you graduate, you'll be supported by people who are invested in your success so you can pursue your goals knowing that help is available if you need it. Imagine your future differently at capella.edu.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
I often think of my life as like I'm a curator of great moments. That's the way I sometimes try to think of it. Because, 90% of moments are going to be boring. But if you can find those few moments and just collect them like a curator and keep them in your mental museum, that's a lovely way to live.
Yeah. So, and did you learn this idea of being a curator of moments by doing this research on gratitude?
I am going to say yes if it sells more books, but but I actually had thought of it earlier.
And does gratitude really work? Does it really make you feel better? Like scientists say, it reduces anxiety, it makes you feel content and have more well-being.
I am just one data point, but for me, it is huge because my default mode is to be annoyed at the world.
I've never seen you cranky or annoyed.
Well, that's because I am so good at faking gratitude until I actually feel it. You know, this whole idea of fake it till you feel it.
I've got AJ Jacobs once again on the podcast. AJ, it's such a pleasure having you on the podcast.
I love being here. You are a hero, and I am very grateful, which I suppose we'll be talking about.
We're going to talk a lot about gratitude because that's the topic of your next book. Every one of your books is always, here's what they always are. They're always high concept, very broad umbrella concept, which you could divide into a million different pieces with so many different stories. And then your technique number 2 is you immerse yourself in the topic. You don't just quote scientific studies or interviews. You actually become the main character of your topic. And then you just look at it from, this is related to the umbrella part. You look at it from so many angles. It's angles I've never thought of. Like when you did It's All Relative, your most recent book, you not only talk about how the whole world's related, blah, 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 which is kind of not a new concept, but you throw the world's largest family reunion. I mean, how many relatives have you now found for yourself through your own experiments in genealogy?
Well, that reunion featured 10,000 of my cousins, including James Altucher, who gave a wonderful speech. I know.
Right after Dr. Oz, who's also been on this podcast.
So yeah, about 10,000. I mean, but of course I've been able to figure out how I'm related to about 7 billion people because we're all related. And
how many have you actually figured out the tree between?
About 10,000.
About 10,000? Because I remember at first we knew we were third cousins because 23andMe told us we were.
Exactly.
But I think now we have the actual branches on Ancestry.com that at least show us related in some way or other.
I know. I think we've got great-great-great-grandpa Eliezer or something.
Someone
thank you
somewhere back in some poor, forgotten serfdom.
Oh, they had such terrible lives. That's another thing I learned from my new book and from my old book. And I think we've talked about this on the podcast. The good old days were terrible. They just sucked.
Yeah.
And thank God. I mean, with all our problems now, that's what I try to keep in mind when I read the newspaper and how, like, all the annoying news, like, at least we didn't live in 1800 when, like, this stuff much worse was happening then. It was just the worst.
Like what?
Well,
like
Steven
let's say a typical family in 1820 in the United States of America.
Well, like, half of my kids would be dead for starters. You had Steven Pinker has a great book on this called Enlightenment Now. Have you read that?
I have, but there's a lot of pros and cons to his book. Some people like it, some people don't. It's very controversial.
It's true. I have some issues with it, but the overall thesis that life sucked, I think, is all too true. I mean, you just look at medicine, like about 60 years ago, if you went to the doctor, you were probably doing more harm to yourself than good. And when I read the encyclopedia for one of my books, I remember reading about the tobacco enema, which was a popular cure for whatever ailed you. You had a little stomach ache. They would actually take a hose, stick it up your butt, and then blow smoke. You know the phrase, blow smoke up your ass? That's where it started. They would blow smoke up your butt, and it was supposed to cure you.
Wait, it doesn't? Because that's
what you do every night?
That's why I don't go to a doctor. I just take tobacco enemas every day.
Oh, well,
but by the way, that book was called The Know-It-All.
Right.
And you read the encyclopedia from A to Z. And again, brilliant, high-level, broad concept, but it gives you fuel for so many stories. You could tell the stories of your life, like what's it like, reading this gigantic set of 26 books, and you can tell stories about every little thing in the encyclopedia that you didn't know about and how it relates to your current life. It's a brilliant idea for a book, and you wonder, why did anyone think about it? And your creative process, I always just find fascinating how you come up with these high concepts, immerse yourself in it, and then you have so much material for a book by breaking it down into sub-stories.
Thank you, yeah. I mean, I try to take something and just push it to the ridiculous extreme. And that is...
And literally. You get very literal.
I do like to get literal.
Your humor is very literal. Like when Ann Coulter said on TV, just how many fucking Jews are there? I remember you wrote a post that got like 20,000 shares on Facebook where you mathematically figured out how many Jews were having sex at that
intercourse.
moment.
Yeah, I was interested. How many fucking Jews are there? And it depends how you define fucking Jews. Like, are they fucking at the time? Or are they like at the moment? Or are they just sexually active in general? So yes, I think taking things literally, I do love that. And it's interesting, you brought up why had no one thought of that before? I do think I have met a guy who said, and he's a writer, he said he had written the proposal for a book about reading the encyclopedia, and he was about to send it when he read in some book publishing magazine that I had sold this book. So a lot of it is luck. And that was actually in the encyclopedia. Elisha Gray. Have you ever heard of Elisha Gray? No, that's because he filed the patent for the telephone about 4 hours after Alexander Graham Bell.
So that we would be
talking.
He would be like a trillionaire now,
yeah.
And instead Alexander Graham Bell.
Right.
Actually, how much money did Alexander Graham Bell make from the telephone?
Oh no, he made a buttload. He did fine. Because there were all these lawsuits. Because Gray was like, I had the idea too. But that's a lesson. Just don't, if you're going to do your errands, do them after you file the patent. He probably went to the grocery store, was like, oh, I'll do this, and then I'll file a patent. No! Sometimes you just really got to do it. So, anyway, I do think luck plays a huge part in life.
But I think your process of creativity supersedes luck. Because let's say the other guy did the book, The Know-It-All. Okay, no problem. You would just come up with another high concept thing and do it.
Well, it's true. I mean, that's where one of my great inspirations is James Altucher, who talks about...
Who's he?
He's this weird looking dude who has odd ideas. And one of them is just the idea of brainstorming multiple ideas, because 98% of them are going to be crap. And that's what I find. It's a numbers game. I have people say, how do you come up with your ideas? I'm like, well, most of my ideas suck. You just don't see them because I don't pursue them or they don't get accepted. But if you come up with enough ideas, some of them are going to be gems.
And a couple of things there. One is, I remember back in 2013, we got together for lunch, and you were telling me, this was like the summer of 2013, you were telling me about another idea you were working on, which is to be a venture capitalist for a year. And instead you did It's All Relative.
Right.
It's All Relative came out about a year ago? Or
Yeah, exactly.
So from 2013 to 2017, you ended up working on It's All Relative. Do you ever feel pressure to come up with books faster, or else people are gonna... Do you ever feel irrelevant if you're not producing every day or every month or every week?
Well, I do get, it's interesting because, I think my publisher would like me to produce one a year. Luckily, I look like I'm prolific because I had a book come out last year and I'm having one come out in November. But the secret
Which
is...
we're going to talk about in a second.
Right. The secret is I had been working on that one for 4 years. So it was like 3 years overdue. So even though I look prolific, I am actually way behind.
But you ever get anxious, like if you don't...
Oh, I totally do.
Because I get anxious if I don't produce podcasts, articles, books all the time, basically.
Well, you are I should study you more for your productivity in Genius.
No, but maybe my stuff is not as high quality as your, 6 New York Times bestsellers now?
But I would say, first of all, it is. And secondly, maybe quantity over quality, maybe there's something to that. Maybe I should just start vomiting out more stuff and instead of trying to sweat it. I once did an article on how to do everything faster. And one of the people I interviewed was this thriller writer, whose name I totally forget now, but who had come out with like 200 books. And he was, you've probably heard this, perfection is the enemy of productivity. Like he was just like, I don't care. I just like vomit it out. And if it's great, then that's fine. But if it's just slightly above average, that's fine too.
Does he make money from the thriller books?
Oh yeah, no, he was like a multi-billionaire. I forget his name.
Because if you have 200 books out there, even if they only sell like $500 worth a month on average each one, it's $100,000 a month.
Right. There is definitely something to quantity over quality.
So with someone like that, I don't know who you're talking about, but my guess is from people I know who write 10,000 words a day, or for the few times that I've written over 10,000 words in a day, like finishing a book quickly, if you outline everything in detail first, then you could just, it's almost like you could turn your brain off and just start writing.
I am a huge outliner. Yeah, I find that so much more productive. So I know exactly. There are some writers who are like, oh, I'm channeling my muse and I don't know where this is going. Oh, I know exactly where it's going. I may take some detours along the way, but I think for efficiency, outlining is a beautiful thing. That said, I once interviewed a Daily Show writer who said
Which
something.
one?
Kevin, oh man, great guy.
I don't know.
All right.
I know some Daily Show writers. I don't know others.
All right. Well, this guy, Kevin, whose last name I forget, I'm sorry. But I said, what is your secret to comedy? And he said his secret was to surprise himself while writing. And I was like, that is so interesting. It makes no sense because how can you surprise yourself? But it also, I understood it because I have been writing sometimes when I'm like, out of nowhere, I just write some weird end to a sentence and it makes me laugh.
Well, I think, and we had this discussion with Tom Papa, who's a well-known stand-up comedian, and his basic approach to coming over the punchline is punchline's funnier if it's completely unexpected. So if that goes along with, if he could surprise himself, he's probably going to surprise everyone.
Right.
And I think that's true for. I mean, you're a humorist. You're not necessarily a stand-up comic, but your writing is always funny, even though there's a lot of like value and information and so on in there. I think you have a humorous way of presenting things, but I think the literal way of looking at things is often unexpected because people don't normally look at things so literally or switch kind of the grammatical meaning of a sentence to be funnier. And it's all relative. Your last book, I would say you came up with things that were unexpected, like just discussing your adventures of trying to see, George H.W. Bush is unexpected that you would be A, related to him, and B, he would agree to see you because you said you were cousins with him, and so that got you through the door.
Right. Well, I think what you said, I like to take on huge topics because then you can go in all different directions. The family book had one on polyamory, which is fascinating. I love polyamory. I could never do it because it's too stressful, like the scheduling. These people, you should see their Google calendars. It's like a mosaic because they've got to figure out all these different boyfriends and girlfriends. So anyway, I love being able to go down these alleys. Yeah.
It's funny. One time I was visiting with a friend of mine who's polyamorous, and his main girlfriend was out of town, and he says he's exhausted because all day long he has to go around the city visiting his other girlfriend.
It is. I can't imagine. And the one thing I could not wrap my mind around is, and I think it's a good goal to have, but it's the opposite of jealousy. It's an emotion called compersion that they talk about, where you are happy when your sexual partner is happy. So you are happy when they are having sex with someone else that they like. And I tried to imagine if my wife was having sex with you, I think you're a terrific guy, but it would drive me nuts. I'm not evolved enough to experience conversion.
Well, okay, so here's the question, and then we'll get to other topics. Here's the question, is that, is it, you said evolved enough, is it an evolutionary thing to be polyamorous, or is it an evolutionary thing to be monogamous? Because the polyamorous people will say, oh no, it's better to be polyamorous because then no man knows if he's the father, so every man in the village will help take care of the kid.
That is true.
But the monogamous side says, no, it's good when the man knows he's the father because he'll kill for that kid.
Right.
And so I don't know. It feels to me that the natural thing is monogamy, just because like you, I would get upset if I wasn't in, if my relationship was not monogamous. I think I wouldn't be able to handle it.
Well, my totally unscientific take is that actually polygamy seems natural. Like when you have a chimp, you have the alpha chimp and he's having sex with 8 women. Women chimps. Female chimps. I like that I've been trained so much to be in this post-Me Too era that I call female chimps women. But that
female giraffes, women.
Right, women. But anyway, I think that might be natural, but I think it's also a bad for society. I would not want to live in a society where, Bill Gates gets, 100 women and losers like me get none. I think that would be an unhappy society. So I think that monogamy, it's not necessarily natural, but it's actually a good solution for society where it's more equal.
I do think we do live in the society where a quote unquote Bill Gates gets 100 women. And
he's not a great example. I was trying to think of Elon Musk. He's a little more...
Or Will Chamberlain claims to have had sex with 20,000 women.
Right.
So...
Which, again, the logistics on that are astounding.
But Will Chamberlain's clearly a super alpha, human being.
Right.
And, simple beta males like us are will there be one woman out there who will grace us with their presence for the rest of our lives? We're grateful for monogamy.
It's true.
And some people do get none.
Right.
So
no, I agree that I almost think it's like socialism. It's slightly
we're talking about this
unnatural.
from the man's point of view too. I mean, women also have the same issues.
Right. Yeah. Even if it were Melinda Gates had, access to 100 men, that might not be good for other women. So, yeah, I agree.
So I want to hit two major topics. One is I guess this was your first book, The Year of Living Biblically, which I still think is probably the book you're most well known for.
Right.
This is where you spent a year of your life living according to the exact literal tenets of the Bible. And you grew up on the cover as you with a beard and a staff and in a robe. And you have all sorts of stories about how you stoned an adulterer in Central Park. And it was super funny. And, it kind of propelled your writing career because it was such a massive bestseller. But more importantly, even, it became a TV show.
It did.
And in our society, having a TV show is that's kind of almost like the reward for writing. I think that's how it's considered. And so in your TV show, it was not just a cable show, it was like a primetime broadcast. It was on CBS. What day of the week was it on?
It was Monday nights at 9:30, and actually they're still going to run the rest of the episodes, 5 episodes in the summer. But
right. So foreshadowing. You got canceled after how many episodes?
8 episodes. And I was overjoyed.
You were overjoyed that it was canceled?
Yes, because I thought, I loved the people doing it, but it was just the exact wrong message.
It was not written like your book at all.
No, it was. I mean, I blame CBS mostly because they just took it and made it into this bland tapioca crap. I mean, we knew we were in trouble when the main character in my book, growing my beard was a big part of it because the Bible says you cannot shave the corners of your beard. So I didn't know where the corners were. So I just let the whole thing grow. And I looked crazy. I looked like Ted Kaczynski crazy. And I scared people. And within the first couple of weeks, CBS was like, let's not grow the beard. It might scare people off. It might scare off our nice Midwestern viewers. And I was like, oh, that's a sign. That's a sign that this is going to be a piece of crap.
Yeah, because if they're going to cut corners on that, literally,
exactly.
What else did they cut? Well, for one thing, the main character was no longer Jewish. He was...
Yes, they converted me. I'm an Upper West Side Jew, and they made him a lapsed Catholic. So I got my foreskin restored. And I love the guy who played me. He was on Mad Men. He played... Peggy's boyfriend on Mad Men.
Oh yeah, you're right. I remember that now.
Yeah, he was great. Jay Ferguson is his name. But yeah, they wouldn't let I wanted in my book. I wanted to show that if you follow the Bible literally, you are crazy. So don't follow. Don't say, oh, the Bible says homosexuality is a sin, because the Bible also says to stone your kid if he's stubborn. It also says to kill astrologers. It says crazy, crazy stuff. So don't take the Bible literally. And instead, the TV show was sort of a commercial for mainstream religion. If you follow the Bible, you'll be a better person, and that you will treat your neighbors more kindly and bring them pies.
It was kind of like the exact opposite of Seinfeld, where the main guidance Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld will give to all the writers was nobody can learn anything ever.
Exactly.
And in Living Biblically, there would be a lesson learned. The main character would learn by the end of each episode.
Yeah, I remember Larry David said, no hugs, no learning. And I think that this show definitely had both hugs and learning.
Hugs and learning.
And also they were learning the things that I didn't approve of. I wanted it to be much, much weirder than it was. First off, what's the process? So somebody came to you after Living Biblically came out and said, hey, can we buy the option rights to your book? Yeah, it had been optioned about 6 or 7 times.
Different companies?
By different companies, and it was going to be a movie. At one point, Marlon Wayans was attached to play me, which was an interesting choice. And then another time, they were going to do a reality show.
That's a lot of work.
Oh, yeah. Well, here, can I give you a 45-second story that I think encapsulates show business? So when the reality show production company came to me, they were like, oh, we want a show. It's going to be very subtle. We'll show the good of religion and the bad of religion. It'll be very intellectual. And cut to a year later, we're in the offices of Spike TV, like the men's channel, and then they're pitching the Bible Olympics. So it'd be like 12 hunky guys running down a mountain carrying tablets. Like who can, like which
That's what it evolved into?
hunky Moses. Yeah, that's what it had evolved into.
And the thing is,
Olympics.
it evolves so slowly into that you're actually in the room trying to pitch this.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, hey, this is wait a second. Yeah, it's like the classic frog in the boiling water. You don't even notice it's happening until you're like, holy crap, this is terrible.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then it got optioned by Johnny.
But every time it got optioned, you got paid, right?
I did.
So what was like the average payment or one of the payments to option a best-selling book like that?
Well, in the beginning, it got lower and lower every time. So it was $50,000 the first time, which I was happy with, of course. And then by the end, it was like $2,000. And I was like, there's no way this is going to make it onto television. I just thought it was a fun lark that because Johnny Galecki from Big Bang had optioned it. And I was like, oh, I'll go out to dinner with Johnny Galecki. I'll take a selfie and it'll be funny and it'll be over. And then it just kept going and going. And I'm like, oh my God, what is happening?
So then once he optioned it, what does he do? He finds a production company to make it, and then they produce. He
had his own production company. They found a writer who was actually brilliant. This is what's so crazy, I think, about television. I listened to him on a couple of podcasts, this writer, and I was like rolling on the floor. I was like, this guy is so smart and so weird and funny. And then CBS just steamrolled all of the brilliance out of him.
Like, how did they do that? So just in terms of process, so they find a writer. Did they find actors yet? The production company?
First, they write a script. Then, if that's approved by CBS, then they...
Oh, so they hadn't... When do they pitch it to CBS?
Well, they pitch it very early on before they've even written a script to all of the networks. And actually, all of them wanted it, but they went with CBS. Then they write a script. If the script is approved, then they get money to cast and make a pilot, which is crazy expensive, like $1.5 million, sometimes like $3 million. I don't know.
And you get you must be a producer at this point. Do you get like a little piece of that?
No, because I'm a terrible businessman, so I was not a producer.
Didn't you have an agent negotiate your rights contracts?
But I actually I don't really want to be a producer because I don't have control. Like, I think what you do is ingenious because you've got your blog, you've got your podcast, you have no one controlling you and editing you, which is beautiful and the way of the future. And like this idea of 100 people, too many cooks just make a really crappy stew.
Because in between you and the book, which you wrote and created 100% of, in between you and the final product of a TV show was the guy who actually bought the option, then the production company, then probably 3 or 4 levels of studio executives. Like probably an agent first. The production company probably has an agent who actually is the one who pitches it to the studios. Then the various hierarchy within the studios, all the way up to the CEO of CBS probably is involved.
Sure.
And then there's, to actually get an episode made, there's writers, assistant writers, other people involved in production, studio executives involved in production. So there's like probably 20 or 30 people in between you and the final product.
Yeah, and it just diluted it until it was just this watery gruel.
I will add, we've had one of the actors from Living Biblically on the podcast, Tony Rock, excellent guy.
Love him.
Just love that guy. Such a funny person.
And he was great on the show, actually.
Yeah.
He was very good. And I think if the writer had been allowed to do what he wanted, I think it would have been really interesting. But,
so what happens? He writes an episode and then CBS just has like 50 notes? Or?
Yeah, exactly. And I wasn't privy to all of that, so I'm slightly speculating, but it does seem that way. Like there's producer's notes, then there's executive notes, there's censor's notes, and you can't, It just gets
Given that it's such a cliche that their notes are bad, why do they give notes at all?
It's a great question. Well, when you get to a certain level, you can just say, screw off. Like, I think that's what Modern Family does, which I think it makes it better.
Or Louis C.K. did it with Louis.
Oh, right.
He didn't allow Fox to see it until the day before it aired. And then they said, no, we can't do that. And he would just walk away. And then they keep coming back. No, it's okay.
I like that. Although he had his own problems.
He has his own problems, but that's how he did get his show on the air. So the day, did you have a sense? Look, it's still CBS primetime. It was still showing, what was the audience every week?
About 5 million.
5 million.
I know.
And again, we were just talking before the podcast how shows in the 70s and 80s, when there was only 3 broadcast channels and no cable really, the typical average medium show would get over 20 million viewers.
Amazing.
Now 0 shows, 0 in all of broadcast TV get I think only 1 gets over 10 million per week, which is like CSI. And then everything else gets below 10 million. So nothing gets 20 million anymore.
Right.
So 5 million, which in the 70s and 80s would have been an instant failure, 5 million was good.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It was decent. For CBS, it wasn't big enough. They needed a breakout show.
Did you ever win the week? Meaning you had the best of CBS, ABC, NBC?
Nope.
What were you up against?
I can't remember, but whatever it was, they crushed us.
And then what was the percentage?
It was a lot of the reality shows like the American Idol and all that stuff.
Well, what was the percentage that was iTunes of your shows?
I can't remember. I got to look that up.
Or Amazon or something else.
Can I just tell you my favorite ratings fact ever that I think says a lot about our society? The moon landing got a 93 share. That means 7% of Americans were like, I'd rather watch the Three Stooges. I mean, it's black and white. I can't see what's going on. I'm not interested in the moon, men on the moon.
That's funny.
And I think that's like, when I think about Trump got 19% of all Americans' votes. If you take all 300 million plus, he got 19%. And I'm like, of course he did. He got 7% of people who wouldn't watch the fucking moon landing because they wanted to watch Three Stooges. So it's very hard to get a completely rational society.
It's very hard to get 100% of people to agree to something, even if it's the most obvious thing in the world, like watching the moon landing versus the Three Stooges. That would seem like an obvious decision. Like
the greatest historical advance in human history versus 3 guys poking each other in the face, which I remember researching this. I think it was the Three Stooges. I don't think I'm making that up. Someone should look into that. But I think that was what it was up against.
You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include 2 or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So, I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.
So bringing this to your show, 5 million people seems like a lot of people to have seen, something that you were initially involved in creating, but it's still only, a little over 1%. It's less than 2% of the country watched your show each week.
And that is nothing.
On a major broadcast channel, which used to be the dominating way we would get all entertainment. It's now just a tiny fraction of how we get entertainment.
Right. And listen, 5 million is a huge amount. If they can monetize that properly, then it would be great, because I always think, I think back to, Tim Ferriss, our mutual friend, who gets a lot of crap, but he always told me, like, if you have 90% of people hate you, but like 10% really love you, that's 30 million people in America. That is a huge amount. So you don't have to appeal to everyone, and I don't think you should even try. So that was a lesson, and I think that was part of the problem. They tried to appeal to everyone, and they turned off most people.
And also, you look at why are things canceled so fast? Because you look at like Seinfeld. Seinfeld had mediocre ratings, I think, until about season 3, and finally it became a hit.
Right.
It wasn't a hit. Nobody knew about it. Like, it was called the Seinfeld Chronicles, season 1. Like, nobody really knew about it in the first couple of seasons, and then suddenly it became a hit because they let it run. Now, you just only had 8 episodes there, and they canceled it.
Right.
And 5 million a week wasn't enough. And I don't know, it seems like there's a tighter turnaround now on any kind of, like, the lifespan of a creative work is gotten shorter and shorter.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's in everything, like in books now. Like, you got to open big, or else,
by the 3rd week, your book's dead.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you don't make the bestseller list in the first week, it's probably never going to make the bestseller list. And even YouTube videos, like, something might get like 1 billion views. Like, we were talking about Gangnam Style. Size, PSY's video it was the first to get to 1 billion views, and then it just kind of like disappeared. Like, nobody would even think of watching it now.
Right. It's funny.
And that's 1 billion views.
That is amazing.
But it also shows that YouTube, where people have more choice of what they can watch, and there's so much more content, that really is where the eyeballs are going.
So are you doing anything with YouTube?
We are probably going to try to make this podcast on YouTube. And we do the post-game analysis we're about to launch on YouTube.
Okay, good.
So,
I want to analyze all the things I did wrong, because I have a lot of criticisms already of my performance.
On your performance on this podcast?
Yeah.
All right, that'll be on the post-game analysis.
All right. Yeah. I would.
Were you disappointed at all when it got canceled? Because I'm sure, were you making money per episode at this point?
Yeah, but not even that much, because, as I say, I'm a terrible businessman. But I was only disappointed because my kids loved going to the set, which was a blast. And no matter what you say, like, that is a crazy experience to have this, 200 people working on something that was somewhat inspired by you, and the fact that you can compare, like, oh, he's got a Goodfellas poster in his apartment. I love the Goodfellas too, and isn't that funny? So yeah, that is the only sad part. But overall, I'm fine. I'm actually mostly quite happy.
Well, it goes along with the fact, though, that, like, you're very much a self-starter. You've created your career in part by launching your career with this book. I mean, you launched it before by being, writing for Esquire and getting a lot of experience writing. But the Year of Living Biblically, it still shows that books are events. And although I remember some of your articles that you've written over the years, the books are the ones that stand out. It's still important to have a book around.
I do feel, even though
books are read actually less than articles.
Right. But the fact that you can have a book and have like 100 articles written about that book, that is the multiplier effect. That's the way I think of it.
Yeah, like, even though, like, take that Ann Coulter Facebook post that we talked about earlier, even though that was shared 10,000 times and probably read hundreds and hundreds of thousands or even millions of times, probably your book, The Year of Living Biblically, or any of your books, are probably read less than that post. It's still, you're known from
totally, yeah.
Year of Living
There's
Biblically.
Still some legacy, something about a physical object that people like. Can I totally contradict myself on something?
Yes, you have my permission.
We have talked about how important it is, like the singular authorial vision, and that's why I liked working in books as opposed to in my new book. I totally argue against that. So I'm a total hypocrite, and because in the new book, should I just say about that?
So tell us what the new book's about.
All right, the new book is called Thanks 1,000, and what I do is I go around the world thanking 1,000 people who helped make my cup of coffee. So it could be it was the farmers. I went to Colombia, South America, but also the truck drivers, the truck drivers couldn't do their job without the road, so I had to thank the people who paved the road. I had to thank the people who, like, made the asphalt for the pavement, and it's like, I would just call people up. I would say, I know this sounds weird, but I want to thank you for making the pesticide that's in the warehouse where my coffee is stored so that my coffee doesn't have bugs in it.
So I want to examine the creative process that came up with this one idea. So you could have just written an article,
right?
That, hey, gratitude is important, but don't forget that there are a lot of things that lead to, any one thing that you enjoy in life. And for instance, with coffee, here's a list of 30 people you could think of that were involved in creating your single cup of coffee. To some extent, that reminds me of the book I Pencil, which talks like...
Which you sent me, which I loved. It was it was like my book.
I forgot I sent it to you.
Yeah, you sent it to me and I was like, hey, this is exactly like my book, but without the gratitude part and with pencils instead of coffee.
But you decided, okay, that was your first kind of a big concept umbrella thing, which is that like everybody says, you should think of 3 things you're grateful for, at the end of the day, and that will make your life better. So instead of taking you took this kind of cliche self-help advice and expanded it to look at the many, many layers that are underneath that initial gratitude. So that's that kind of the high concept.
Yeah, push it as far as you can. That's the way. And I will tell you, I thank my son for helping me come up with it because, I had read all of the studies about gratitude and it makes you less depressed. It makes you sleep better, tons of science behind it. And so I started this was a couple years ago, I would say a prayer of thanksgiving before my meal. But I'm an atheist, so a prayer was kind of weird. So I wouldn't thank God. So I would say, I'd like to thank the farmer who grew these tomatoes and the trucker who drove the tomatoes to the store and the cashier who rang the tomatoes up. And my son was like, Dad, those people aren't here. They can't hear you. Like, if you really care, you would go out and thank them in person. And I was like, that is an interesting idea.
Yeah, because now your son gave you a way to picture how you can immerse yourself in the high concept story.
Right.
And not only that, you've also given yourself an opportunity to tell 1,000 stories and then pick the best ones to make a book. So you're going to thank all these people, and some of them, because you're actually traveling to South America and then you're traveling to where you're calling the pest, you're going to have stories to tell.
Yeah, they're like 10. It's basically structured. I thank 1,000 people, but I focus on the stories of 10 of them and the lessons I learned. Because, I did learn, I loved the guy who actually chooses which coffee is at my coffee shop, a great guy named Ed Kaufman. And
he's named Ed Kaufman.
And, yeah,
that's kind of funny for some reason.
That is funny. You know what?
His name chose his career. That's your next book. How many people where their names choose their careers? And you're going to talk to every single one.
Dentists all become dentists. Yeah, I had read a study about that. So I don't know if that was him, but he would he showed me how to taste coffee, which is like the most ridiculous wine sommelier you've ever seen. So first you have to sip it. You have to, slurp it, because you want the coffee to go all over your mouth, because you have taste buds in your cheeks and in the roof of your mouth, so you got to get them all. So it's like a comically loud slurp, which I won't do because it might sound gross on radio. But then he would go, his face would light up and he would be like, this coffee tastes like, I'm sensing hints of Honeycrisp apple and, and maple syrup. And I would take a taste and I'd be like, I'm sensing coffee. This tastes like coffee to me.
Yeah, people, I cannot tell the difference between the coffee I get at the cart on the corner or Starbucks coffee or the Keurig cup coffee or I can't ever taste the difference between. And I take my coffee black. I can't taste the difference between any coffee.
Well, I am mostly that way, but because of Ed, I was inspired. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to let the coffee sit on my tongue for 5 seconds. We're all busy, but 5 seconds I could spare, and just really focus on the texture and the sweetness and acidity, and you do begin to taste the difference. And that, psychologists say, that's such a big part of gratitude. This idea of savoring, of taking a moment and holding on to it as long as you can, because otherwise life just goes by in a blur.
How do you do that? Let's say you're at a music concert that you really wanted to go to. How do you savor the moment?
That, I would say, you choose a moment. You choose a moment to really focus on. So whether it's I don't go to many concerts, but whatever, the guitarist, his final flourish, and just admire the way his arm moves, and just really go into detail on one moment. Because if you just treat all moments equally, then it's all a blur.
So you pick a moment and you try to find as many details that are interesting as possible in that moment.
Right.
And then it gives you a way of savoring it for later.
Yeah. I often think of my life as like I'm a curator of great moments. That's the way I sometimes try to think of it. Because, they're going to be 90% of moments are going to be boring. But if you can find those few moments and just collect them like a curator and keep them in your mental museum, that's a lovely way to live.
Yeah. So, and did you learn this idea of being a curator of moments by doing this research on gratitude?
I am going to say yes if it sells more books, but but I actually had thought of it earlier. But it reinforced this
And have you
message.
been doing it?
Yeah. That's the way I try to live. Like I often, when I read a book or I do a podcast or listen to a podcast, I will try to pick one moment. Because I know if I don't pick that one moment to remember, then the whole thing will just go away. So I'm going to pick one moment from today. I don't know what it is yet, to really remember and be like, wasn't that funny or wasn't that terrible?
So why'd you pick coffee for this book?
Well, partly...
I'll get to the stories, by the way. When the book's coming out in November, you'll come back on in November and we'll talk about the actual stories and gratitude and things like that. But why'd you pick coffee? As opposed to your family or, I don't know, anything else? What other things did you think of?
Well, my kids they wanted me to do s'mores because they thought, we'll get a lot of s'mores in the house. But coffee, it seemed, first of all, I do love my cup of coffee. Second, it employs like 200 million people in the world. It's the most drunk beverage. I could be making that up, but I'm pretty sure it's true. And the number of people who have to contribute to it is astounding. And everything is like that, but coffee especially, because it's so global. You got the coffee beans. You got, I visited a steel plant where they make the steel for like the trucks that carry the coffee and the stop signs. You don't think about who makes the stop signs.
What other stuff did you consider besides coffee and s'mores?
Coffee, s'more. Well, I was like a light bulb, a pair of socks. It could be anything. It doesn't have to be food because everything we do has thousands of people behind it. Oh, and let me get back to my hypocrisy because remember we were talking about the importance of a sole author. Well, one of the points in my book was that this idea of one person being responsible for a creative object is an illusion. Because for my book, for instance, it says on the cover, thanks 1,000, A.J. Jacobs. But really it should say, thanks 1,000 by A.J. Jacobs with my editor, the graphic designer, the researcher, the person who chose the fonts, the person who cut down the wood for the paper. My book would not exist without thousands of people. So this idea of one sole author is bad, and I think it's dangerous. It's a bad way to think about the world.
So I think I've noticed with you through several books now, the process of you writing a book, it's not like you have all of the knowledge and wisdom in advance. You yourself change as a result of writing the book. Like, so now do you look at everything and kind of think of all the different people who might be behind everything?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it is. And it definitely helps my life to think that way because it's like,
It also helps with problems. Like any problem can't be just your fault.
That's true. That is true. Yeah, it is. It is freeing in that way that we are not alone. We are just. I have a chapter called 6 Degrees of Gratitude, and just this idea that everything depends on everything else, and even it gets recursive because the people who are in the steel factory were like, well, we couldn't do our job unless we were hopped up on coffee. So thank coffee for helping us make the steel.
That's funny.
Yeah, it was nice.
So I mean, we'll definitely talk more about this. Are you done with the book? And now you're waiting for November for it to come out?
Yeah. I mean, the hard part was actually thanking 1,000 people. So I still have a couple.
How long did it take?
Well, every day I would wake up and I would just visit people or call them or email them. And it was like, some people were like, they'd say like, what are you selling? Is this a pyramid scheme? What the hell is going on?
Right, because people are suspicious of anyone who has, just wants to just do something good for them, like thanking them with no ulterior motive.
But most actually were very, very grateful, and they would It was like I would make it was like anti-crank phone calls. Like in middle school, I would call my headmaster and say dirty things. This time I was like, they would be like, you just made my day. And, it's not me. It's just anyone could do it. But it's just this. And I was so, for me, it was so beneficial. Like I wasn't just helping them. Because I think I'm more Larry David than Tom Hanks. Like I am default mode cranky and annoyed at everything. So
I've never seen you cranky or annoyed.
Well, that's because I am so good at faking gratitude until I actually feel it. So this was one of the big lessons. I would spend 2 hours calling and thanking people, and by the end, it had worked its magic. This whole idea of fake it till you feel it, or
and does gratitude really work? Does it really make you feel better? Like scientists say, it reduces anxiety. It makes you feel content and have more well-being and happiness.
I am just one data point, but for me, it is huge because I am, as I say, my default mode is to be annoyed at the world, and that is not a good way to go through life. That's not a fun way to go through life. I mean, it's good in some senses for material because you do need a little annoyance at the way the world is, but yeah, this has made me a much happier person.
So I always think about like all the high concept things you've done. So now it's gratitude, family, Bible, all of the world's knowledge, exercise. I'm going through all your books. What's a concept you've thought about tackling that you haven't yet, or that you're thinking about now?
Well, I've got a lot of rejected ones because, as we talked about, 90% of ideas suck. So I had a lot of readers who had said, you should become the greatest lover in the world and do all the positions in the Kama Sutra. And I actually brought it up with my wife, and she's like, "No fucking way." That is like, and I have to agree.
Literally, I gotta say, literally,
no fucking way. That's exactly right. I agree with her. I'm too old. Like I don't have the flexibility in my back for that, and I talk about this in my health book. I have pretty low testosterone, which I thank God for, because if I had more testosterone and a higher sex drive, what the hell would I do with it? Like, what's the outlet for that? Nothing. Like I get a certain amount.
Well, a lot of people, get more testosterone. They do like kind of testosterone replacement therapy.
Yeah, no, that's what I've considered, and some people have recommended, and I'm like, no way, because then my sex drive would go up, and there's just no outlet for that aside from prostitutes or polyamory, which is not what I'm interested in. So I'm quite happy. I'm quite content. I'm very grateful for my low testosterone.
What are the 1,000 people you would thank for that? Like your
my
parents, your dad?
Exactly. Something probably in the water that made my, that increased my estrogen. Who knows? But thank God.
So that's a rejected idea?
That was a rejected idea. Another rejected idea was, this was a while ago, so now it's almost part of life. But I wanted to do a project where I had no face-to-face communication. It was all electronic, so texting, IM, Skype, and with my kids too. So I would raise my kids by Skype, and I thought that was interesting. But my wife again was like, no. Because you're not.
So she's the first editor.
She is the first editor.
Right.
Exactly. So that was one. There are a ton. I'm trying to think of another one. Wait, I had a good one there for a second, but I forgot it. This one I still think would be interesting, but I just never got around to it. I think drones and robots are changing our lives tremendously. So I would be interested in having my drone life or my robotic life where everything is done by drone. So, I would, instead of hanging with my kid, I would get a drone to go into his bedroom, and I could read to him through the drone while still relaxing in my bed.
That's funny.
So yeah, if anyone out there wants to try that.
I feel like that's another one, like the communication one, where that'll go quickly out of date just because technology, that probably will happen in 5 years or 10 years or whatever.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's interesting. There are pros and cons to this technology revolution. But one is, when my kids go off to, live in Kuala Lumpur or whatever, like it really won't matter in 10 years you'll have on your headset and you can have dinner with them like they're right there.
Like what about living for a year entirely in a virtual reality?
I actually bought virtual reality for just that idea, and I haven't gotten around to it, but I want to, because it's weird. Like you're in there for just like 10 minutes and you take off your little VR mask and it's like a jolt. You're like, what the hell? This reality sucks.
And you probably don't have to do a year. You can probably do a month, and that's interesting to write a book.
Well, I think just a week. I mean, there are stories of people who get physically ill. Like if you're in it too long, you get physically ill. But I would love it. I think it'd be really interesting. And
you could probably break a world record, the longest time in a virtual reality.
I like it.
So,
will you join me? Come in.
All right. If you do it, I'll be a participant.
That would be good. Because there are all these games where, you can...
We can shoot at each other.
Yeah, but we can have
die
a podcast,
over and over again.
a VR podcast.
Yeah, we can do a podcast in the virtual reality.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what's another idea?
Let's see, what were some of the others?
I'm just trying to think of what to steal.
This idea I actually liked, but I never got around to it, so you feel free to steal. But it was basically like, spam, taking every spam, so, actually going to Nigeria and meeting the prince, and trying to figure out how I can get my 14 million.
I love this. That's a good idea.
And to trying all the penis enlargement devices. And that, I think it's a fun idea. It didn't seem like that it would yield enough profound insights to change my life, which I like to do, like something that is kind of
I don't know,
funny.
but like the Prince of Nigeria thing, like going to visit that person and seeing, they're poor, living in a shack, or I don't know. I mean, they could be wealthy because of the spam working.
But maybe the ethical thing to do would be to give them money just because they have so much less than we do. So, yeah, it would be nice to know. Feel free to do that. The spam, living my life, living spam.
Well, AJ, I want to say first, this is an advanced advertisement for your book on gratitude. You'll come on again and we'll talk about the specific stories and more things to be grateful
available for pre-order on Amazon. Thanks.
It's available now. I'm gonna get it. I'm gonna
probably get you a free copy.
And Living Biblically, I watched, and I feel bad it was canceled, but it was definitely not the same as your book.
Well, thank you. And
although
again,
I love the actors, and Tony Rock was great, and
the producers were lovely and wonderful. It just, TV is a crazy sausage fact. Is that the right word? TV, I don't know. It beats.
Is there anything
all
you
the
could have
humor.
done differently?
Yeah, it beats all the humor out of at least broadcast television.
Like, could you have done it in any other way? Could you have sold it to Netflix and been more creative with it?
Netflix, like HBO or Netflix would have been much better.
Did HBO bid for it?
No, they just took it to the networks. So that's interesting. But I don't know. The other thing I want to point out is I could definitely not have done better. If I had written the scripts, they would have sucked so much more. So I
Why do you think that?
realized...
Because you don't think you're a screenwriter?
Yeah, I just don't like telling... I mean, with a few years of practice, I could probably do it, but it's just not the genre I'm used to.
Have you ever thought about writing fiction?
Have you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you have written fiction.
I have written fiction, and I was going to do a novel last year, but I switched my interest to stand-up comedy in 2017.
Which I love. I'm a big fan of your stand-up. Yeah.
You have to come again at some point.
I know. I've heard the act has changed.
The act has changed considerably. It changes every few weeks.
I love that.
So, and now that I've been recently engaged, the focus is completely on that, at least for the next few weeks.
Interesting. Okay, I need that.
So, but AJ, thanks once again for exploring your creative process with us and teaching us about gratitude and TV and always so much more.
Thank you, James. And thanks to your parents for having sex so that they produced you, and your grandparents as well.
For reluctantly, for barely tolerating each other enough to have me. For my grandparents, for, I don't know what to...
They
thing.
did it. They did it too.
They all barely tolerated each other. They had back then because everybody just married their neighbors.
Right.
So,
yeah, it was not good.
So whoever made the decision to have them move next to each other.
Well, I love it. I love coming on. So anytime you want me, I'm here.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, AJ, and see you soon.
See you soon, James.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.